Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Lunch, Learn, and Lobby webinar. We are excited. We're over the moon about our February 12th Ring Around the Capitol, where we will be joined with so many other advocates talking about the Intellectual Disabilities Bill and its relation to the death penalty, capital punishment in Georgia. We have an esteemed panel. I am so privileged to work with these two colleagues of mine, and you're going to be in for a treat listening to different tactics and strategies on how to lobby, what lobbying is, what organizing is, what advocacy is. I will speak from a national lens as the national founder and director of flocc. Kathy Harmon Christian, who is the executive director of Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. She'll be talking about how to individually engage and how to engage in GFADP and the history of the bill. And then finally, my colleague Wesley, who is the executive director of the Georgia Interfaith Public Policy Center, will give faith leaders, faith groups information on how to engage in this work. So without further ado, I will pass it to Kathy to start the webinar. Kathy?
Thank you so much, Joya. So, as Joya said, my name is Kathy Harmon Christian, and I'm the Executive Director for Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And today I'm going to speak about a bill that will be coming before the 2025-2026 legislature. And it's about intellectual disability and the death penalty. And I wanted to start with a definition of what is intellectual disability. I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion on this, and it can be challenging for people to understand what this might mean. As I begin to talk about the bills themselves and why there may be a protection for those with intellectual disability from the death penalty, I wanted to start with this definition. And it's taken from the American Association for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And the essence of it is this: intellectual disability is characterized by significant limitations both in intellectual functioning and in adaptive behavior. So it's not just one's IQ, it also involves adaptive behavior. And that adaptive behavior involves everyday social and practical skills. A key aspect of this is that intellectual disability originates before the age of 18. And that's a crucial part of it, that it originates before a person is 18. So I do want to make a caveat that people with intellectual disabilities are capable. They're capable of a lot of things. So I sometimes find that these definitions that talk about significant limitations, they're very important, but I also want to say that we're talking about a whole person. Intellectual disability as well is not a mental illness. It is not a mental illness. And some of the reason that we can discern between the two is that intellectual disability is what you would consider when you had people going into what was called special needs classes. We don't necessarily use that terminology or that distinction anymore, but if you have in mind someone like that, this is who we're talking about with intellectual disability. They have limitations in intellectual functioning and in adaptive behavior. And we do use the term intellectual disability. All right, I want to talk about the history of legislation around the persons with intellectual disability and the death penalty. Good news is that Georgia was the primary mover across the United States with this. There was a person named Jerome Bowden, and in 1986, he was executed by the state of Georgia. He was a Black man with intellectual disability, and he was known to have an IQ of 65. And while he was strapped to the electric chair and awaiting death, he was thanking the prison for taking such good care of him. This created an outcry across the United States, saying, how could the state of Georgia executed this man? And in response, in 1988, Georgia passed a law prohibiting the execution of people with intellectual disabilities. We were the first state in the union to prohibit the execution of the intellectually disabled. However, And this groundbreaking action did play a critical role in shaping the national debate around the criminal justice system's treatment of the intellectually disabled. However, a drafting error and issues with the law itself, the statute in Georgia, created a highly prejudicial process for determining intellectual disability, all but ensuring that the law's protections are unattainable for those who seek it. So the same law that came into effect in 1988 is still in effect today. And so that's why we're currently seeking to change that law, is because we have not been able to truly protect people with intellectual disabilities from the death penalty. Um, and so this is a history. I do want to bring up in 2017 a bill that was bipartisan led with 7 other sponsors amended Georgia's criminal procedure laws to replace the terms mental retardation and mentally retarded with the more modern and appropriate terms intellectual disability and people with intellectual disability. This is the law of the land now. So we are meant to use intellectual disability. It is the law in Georgia. In 2002 is when a really important bill came before the United States Supreme Court. And in that bill, what happened is it is unconstitutional to impose the death penalty upon individuals with intellectual disability. It's unconstitutional as of 2002. Nevertheless, in Georgia, in particular, poor legal representation and onerous state evidentiary requirements still result in death sentences and executions of the intellectually disabled. If you want to move the slide forward. So I just wanted to say, in summary, in 1988, in response to the execution of Jerome Bowden, Georgia became the first state to prohibit the execution of intellectually disabled criminal defendants. And however, Georgia's law set the burden of proof for a person to prove that they were intellectually disabled at the standard beyond a reasonable doubt. No other state uses this standard. All other states use a preponderance of the evidence or clear and convincing testimony. In Atkins v. Virginia, it's based on yet another real live person, Daryl Atkins. And this case went before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made the decision that executing individuals with intellectual disabilities violates the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. It did leave the states able to determine aspects of their state law. And unfortunately, Georgia's state law, the same one that's been in effect since 1988, its unique death penalty law is allowing the killing of intellectually disabled people. So, Joy, would you go back just one slide? Oh, 2 slides, sorry. I didn't get these properly arranged. In 2022, there was a bill, HB 1426, that came before the Georgia General Assembly. And that bill did try to change the burden of proof. And it also did try to change pretrial proceedings, which is another important part of this legislation. But it only made it to the second reading stage. Then in 2024, HB 1014 is another bill that came up before the General Assembly. And it was then tabled for very good reasons. We wanted to work with the Prosecuting Attorney's Council to iron out any issues that they might have with this bill. So we've been working on that consistently over this last year, and we are moving into 2025 with a bill that is supported by the Speaker of the House. And this is a big deal that the Speaker of the House wants this bill to pass. It is sponsored by Republican Chairman Bill Werkheiser, who has been a tireless advocate for this bill. He was a co-sponsor on HB 1426. He was the sponsor for HB 1014, and now he's again the sponsor for the House bill that's coming into effect. We do not have a number yet. It is in its final drafting stages before it goes to the council of the legislature that formats it well for the legislature. So we're just waiting for that to be completed, and then I will be able to share with you that number. But the two essential aspects of this bill is it will lower the burden of proof for a person to prove that they are intellectually disabled. And it will do that by changing the language to a preponderance of the evidence or clear and convincing evidence. I'm not quite sure what the bill is finally deciding on, but both of those are important, or they work well, either one of those. And it will also allow a pretrial determination of intellectual disability. Currently in Georgia, what happens is that determination of intellectual disability happens at the sentencing phase and by a jury. This is not what happens in other states. And I'm happy to discuss this further in the questions or at another time, but I think I'll leave it for there right now because this is a heavily legal bill. And the most important thing to know is that what we want to do is lower the burden of proof so that people with ID can just do what they need to do, which is to show that they have ID. And so therefore not be liable to capital punishment and the death penalty. And if we can go to the last slide of my section, one more, there we go. This is really important. I'd like you to reflect on why people with intellectual disabilities are exempt according to the US Supreme Court and why we need to have in Georgia this protection. So I'm going to read this out. So I'm changing the language here. Intellectually disabled persons frequently know the difference between right and wrong and are competent to stand trial. But by definition, they have diminished capacities to understand and process information, to communicate, to abstract from mistakes and learn from experience, to engage in logical reasoning, to control impulses, and to understand others' reactions. Their deficiencies do not warrant an exemption from criminal sanctions, but it diminishes their personal culpability, such that it seems to be an issue that most of the states in the United, I don't want to be too extreme on this, but the sense that we consider it an issue of dignity, an issue of what the kind of people that we want to be in the United States is that we don't execute the intellectually disabled. And so I want to leave you with that right now, is why we do it, is because there is a significant reason why we should not be doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So good afternoon, all. My name is Wesley Myrick. I am the Executive Director of the Georgia Interfaith Public Policy Center. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the faith community's role, particularly in advocating for this bill to be passed in our state. If you're not familiar with the center, we've really functioned as the unifying voice for the faith community. And so our board is comprised of bishops from several different denominations: the United Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church, the Evangelical Christian Church. And in total, we represent, those leaders represent more than 350,000 Georgians. And so it's very important for us that when there are matters like this that are core to the values of the faith community, which are, of course, love, justice, mercy, and hospitality. We want to make sure that we stand in solidarity with our partner organizations in this coalition that are working to advance this work. And so that's why we're here, and we'll talk a little bit about why and how you can start to get engaged at the state level. So one of the things you'll learn is that the faith community is oftentimes involved in lots of conversations, but those voices are oftentimes splintered, right? A particular legislator might speak to their particular pastor or particular faith leader to seek guidance, right? To seek some sort of absolution or guidance or resolve around their particular deeply held belief. And that's great, and we support that. But there's an opportunity for all of us who have a monicum of faith and are those persons that seek goodwill and to support the common good, to do some action and to take action as our faith denotes. So that said, what can you do? You can continue to attend trainings just like this one that tell you about the specific matters that are going to be coming up before the legislator each year, before the legislatures each year and during the session. You can talk to and have community organizing events. So you can talk to your colleagues on college campuses. You can talk to people in the workplace. You can talk to your fellow churchgoers in your community congregations, all because we know that these sorts of matters get changed because legislators get calls, they get emails, they have face-to-face conversations with their constituents, but also people, just good citizens in the state who are interested in the legislation passing. And so we all have a role to play in making sure that we are talking about this particular bill to our legislators, to our friends, to our relatives, and everyone in our circle. As Kathy mentioned, this is not a divisive topic. It's something that the speaker supports. It's something that many legislators support, and so we want to make sure that we are holding them to that support over the course of the session. That said, one of the things that you'll see throughout the session are going to be policy alerts that talk to you about matters just like this. In this instance, we're talking about the intellectual disabilities bill, making sure that people that have intellectual disabilities are not subject to the death penalty in our state. There are going to be several instances throughout this process where it's in committee and you might want to go and show a presence there. So we might issue an alert in that respect. But that's something you can do anytime, right? You don't have to be prompted to do that. You can call your legislator, both in the House and in the Senate, and let them know that you support this bill. Send emails. We have templated emails that we can share out with you all so that if you have smaller group organizations or just smaller groups within your congregations and communities and you want to support this through a collaborative effort, you can do that. And you can have a template. And what we know to be true is our legislators respond when they get consistent feedback from the community that they serve. And so, again, that's another tool in the toolbox. We make sure that you have those tools. We also want to make sure that you are comfortable exercising them. And last but not least, I want to make sure that we are focused on showing up for our day at the Capitol on February 12th. As Kathy mentioned, that's something that's going to be really, really critical. That's an opportunity for us to have face-to-face conversations with legislators and to demonstrate the power of this community to advocate for the common good. And I'll turn it over now to Joya.
Thank you so much, Wesley, and thank you, Kathy and Wesley, for bringing up some good points. I'm probably going to elaborate on some of the points that you've already raised. First, I want to mention that we do see the question feature and also the chat. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar. We don't anticipate it to be too terribly long, but for those who are playing it back and listening to it or watching it at a different time than the time that we have scheduled, we want you to be able to have access to those responses. So I just wanted to let folks know we see your questions and we see the chat. And if more questions arise that we haven't addressed, please place them in the question and answer feature. So I am Joya Aaron Thornton. I am the founder and also the national director for the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition, or the Faith Leaders of Color Clergy Coalition. And flocc is a multi-faith organization that is dedicated to advocating for justice, equity, and interrogation into our American capital punishment system. So what flocc does on a national level is we allow space for Black and Indigenous faith leaders to build community, to ask questions, to take action, all towards ending and eliminating the use of the American capital punishment system, or the death system, as we call it. flocc currently has presence in over 21 US states. We have influenced policy on a state and also federal level in just our short few years of formation. And I am here to just share a few tips on what we use to empower states locally and nationally towards advocacy and lobbying. So I'm going to stop my share and just talk to you for a little bit. So organizing is one of the most powerful strategies in the world for social and political change. When everyone works together, the power of organizing has generated major media awareness, narrative change, policy change, transform culture, sustain participatory policies and projects, and also reform dismantled and or abolished systems. Grassroots lobbying differs from professional lobbying in that professional lobbyists are usually paid for their services. They are registered in multiple states, and they dedicate their time and reporting to one firm or one entity. Now, grassroots lobbyists like yourself, and who we hope that you will be with us on February 12th and beyond, they can simply request meetings with elected officials. They can attend lobby days like the one we have in February, and their influence, your influence, can alter the way an elected official thinks or votes on a particular issue. You do not have to register to be a lobbyist in your state to do grassroots lobbying. I definitely want to repeat that. You don't have to be a registered lobbyist in your state, and that's any state, including Georgia, to do grassroots lobbying with organizations. You can simply request a meeting with a lawmaker. So, what you want to do is identify a policy issue that an individual, group, or community is facing. You want to build power, you want to leverage your resources. When the issue is identified, you want to research the history of the issue. As Kathy has just mentioned about the history of the ID bill, this has been going on since the 80s, since I was born. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. What you also want to do as a great grassroots lobbyist is build on the work that has already been done. We've all heard the phrase that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that is absolutely true. There are professional policy folks, advocates, community leaders that have already done really great work in this space. Take those lessons, build upon those lessons, and just fine tune them. Then you have to create a reasonable and achievable path and timeline towards your goal. We've all done that with this bill. Just join us in the work. You also have to be aware that potential challenges may arise, like political climates, natural disasters, gubernatorial actions, and etc. So be aware of the changes that may happen that you can't control on your path towards to changing or influencing this policy. But what you want to do is identify the decision makers that can enact or affect change. This is also called power mapping. Elected officials work for you. You should never feel that you are bothering your elected officials. They have vowed to listen to you. They have vowed to protect their constituents. The values of elected officials should reflect the people in their districts that they represent. When they don't, it is okay to challenge them respectively. And at the last resort, it is also okay to vote them out when their terms run out. So find out who represents you. If you don't know it, you can reach out to any of our organizations and we will be happy to provide that information for you. However, their contact information should be public for state and local officials. You may call them, send them an email or a letter to share your appreciation or concerns with them. If they or a member of their team responds, that begins the line of communication. Now, we understand, and we have also experienced ourselves, us on the call, that no response can be due to a myriad of issues. It could be technical issues. They could be genuinely busy with pressing issues. They could be waiting for the right time to respond to you based on projects that they have already going. But again, if you feel that you are being ignored by your elected officials, what has been successful for me and other groups are to attend events like Ring Around the Capitol on February 12th. Meet us there. Better yet, beat us there. Don't be shy. Our organizers are working behind the scenes to make sure that we have senators and elected officials present, representatives to speak with you. When you join us on February 12th, what we want you to do, this is your script, so write it down. Introduce yourself. Tell the lawmaker what district you live or work in. Thank them for their service and commitment to democracy. Share with them why you are concerned about the intellectual disabilities bill in Georgia, and you want them to learn more about the bill and ultimately support it. Tell them, this is really good, that you are connected to a larger body if you are, whether it be a civic group, a club, a church, or a coalition. If you are not a part of any of those groups, you can be a part of GFADP and also Georgia Interfaith today. If you are a Black faith leader, you can be a part of flocc as well. That is already a larger group. Ask them for their contact information or the contact information of their schedulers or assistants. Smaller groups equal larger groups. Talk to your family, friends, and neighbors about this issue. Share content on social media. Be persistent in your advocacy before, during, and after the session. Lawmakers, they need to know that you are an expert and a long-term supporter of the issue, not just a fair weather supporter that just hops on different things that are popular. We can do this. Though flocc is national, our local tactics with states are strong and they bring forth sustainable change that people can touch and see. So I just want to conclude by saying I am over the moon about Ring Around the Capitol. I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. I can't wait to see everyone there on February 12th. Kathy and Wesley, we're going to go ahead and address some of the questions, and we hope you guys have enjoyed this webinar. We've been on time. We've only dedicated about 30 minutes. So we have one question from Cullen Larson. Cullen Larson says, are there other advocacy resources that we have? And Cullen has also dropped Catholic Mobilizing Network and GCADP's link in the, we've already had some answers. So Kathy, would you like to answer the question live just for folks who don't see that?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So let's see, answered questions. Could we have copies of the slides to reflect back on the information that we talked about today? And yes, we are very happy, and we will be sending out the slides, as well as links for you to get involved in advocacy for this important bill and work, as well as links to the 3 organizations that we represent here today, and as well as a copy of this webinar. And I see Wesley also answered a question.
Yes. So there was a question in the chat or in the QA feature just around what are a list of other faith communities that are doing internal social justice work. So there are quite a few, in fact. So there are some that are mostly focused on specific issues. So for instance, there is an interfaith organization that just works on children and youth issues called the Interfaith Children's Movement. There are other interfaith organizations that work on, a host of other matters, right? So the Atlanta Interfaith Collaborative is also another organization that's interfaith that does this sort of work. So there's a host of them. So I just dropped my email into that answer and said, tell me what it is that you're looking for, and I can connect you to that party. There are a host of us. So happy to share more on that if there's a specific area of focus.
And I wanted to mention that while Joya and Wesley are connected to the faith communities, GFADP is a nonpartisan 501c3. We work with multi-faith leaders and really anyone who is interested in moving forward in Georgia with alternatives to the death penalty, as well as related things like juvenile life without parole and the intellectual disabilities bill and the death penalty. We consider these things related. They're very important to us. And if you do sign up with GFADP, we will be sharing any action alerts any day at the Capitol. And also, I do something called the Remembering Project. So if you don't know about the 77 people whose lives have been taken by the state of Georgia, I mark every one of their anniversaries with an email that I send out about who they were beyond their crime. And we know that people affected by the death penalty are much wider than the person themselves. They're the families, all the people that visit them, that love them. And so I think it's important for people to understand more about what goes on in our capital punishment system and the many victims that it creates beyond the person who is given the particular sentence.
And Kathy, what time should people arrive on February 12th?
Yes, thank you so much, Wesley. So the event for February 12th is going to be it's a Wednesday. I just found out that the schedule has been set, that the legislators will be there and in session that day, which is great for us. I also just got word that we will be able to have a press conference. They literally called me today to say that the South Stairs have been booked. So I will be sending out a fuller schedule, but we are going to meet at 9 o'clock at Trinity Methodist Church. It is right next to the parking garage. For ease of people with disabilities, for ease of access, we'll start there with time to meet and greet each other, to learn more about this bill, to talk more about what the experience of meeting with your legislators can be and will be at the ropes to answer any questions people might have. It's really a fun time to be together. And if you've never been over to the Capitol, now is the time. We make it as friendly as we can possibly make it because your voice matters, and you I want you to have that opportunity of being able to come to the People's House, which is the Gold Dome, and to be able to meet wonderful people like Wesley and Joya and other folks who are doing this work, have been doing this work a very long time. And we're going to advocate for this bill and really, move it forward. The other thing I want to say is I would really encourage you to RSVP for the day at the Capitol because I have a few questions there, including what's your comfort level with meeting with your legislator? And one of the most important things we can do is it won't be this day, February 12th. It'll be sometime else, but we want to create scheduled meetings. If you are a constituent for a legislator that sits on the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee, we hope to have scheduled meetings with you as a constituent, with that person that sits on that committee that will probably hear this bill, and with somebody who can really talk about the specifics of the bill. You would not be going in there alone. But these conversations are critical. And so if you RSVP for February 12th, we will know who you are and we can talk and maybe schedule this time that's convenient to you, the legislator, and other people beyond February 12th.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I've seen a couple of folks raise their hand. This is a webinar feature, so we're unable to actually see you. You can see us, but we're also unable to hear you. So if you have questions, please place them in the chat or the question and answer feature. I do want to send a shout out, and I don't want to get in trouble, but we have a couple of our partners that are on the call. Leslie Anderson. I know Jana, she's been very instrumental with the Georgia Catholics, Leslie with mobilizing advocates in the Jewish community in Georgia. If we have other partners that I don't see, Kathy or Wesley, please shout them out. And I just want to tell them thank you so much. Everyone will receive a copy of this recording. Along with a copy of this recording will be links to our organizations, links where you can sign up, and scripts to help you. Because again, this is a lunch, learn, and lobby. And we want to empower you to be confident when it comes to the event on the 12th.
Yes, so I want to shout out to Jeff Jones, our wonderful partner with the I always get this wrong. Unitarian Universalist. Goodness gracious, I'm so sorry, Jeff. I'll be prepared next time. And then also Cullen Larson is on the planning team from CMN. And then I see one of our long-term supporters, Neva Corbin from St. Bartholomew Episcopal. So lovely to see y'all here.
Yeah,
Oh, and Reverend Deborah Williams as well. She is the host of Trinity Methodist, who is hosting us the morning of the day at the Capitol. We are so grateful for her hosting our event.
Thank you to all of our partners. Charge it to our head and not our hearts if we omitted your names, but we're very thankful that all of you are here. And we know that each one of us represents a larger whole. So each one, please reach one before February 12th. I'll pass it to Wesley if you have anything else to say, Wesley.
I was just going to say thank you. Thank you to my board member, Leslie Anderson, who's here on the call, and as well as to Pastor Williams at Trinity. I've known her for a while, so it's good to see her again, and we appreciate you all being here.
Kathy, you want to close us out and give the charge?
All right. So, what is my charge? My charge is that we can do this. This is winnable. So, in this place of where many people I know feel uncertain, they feel concerned about what's happening next. This is something that brings tremendous hope. This is something that we can do together. And it speaks to our greater angels. It speaks to common human dignity. And it is a bipartisan effort. So let's be part of that. Let's all be part of this together and boost our spirits and do something that matters. So I look forward to seeing you a part of this effort in whatever way you can be a part of it. We welcome you.